Hey, Tim Alden here. We're going to do some swivel knife finesse work for you. So I got my leather, I wet it pretty good. I'm going to get a little more water on here, and these are just some styles of deco cuts that you're going to see in flowers, and we're just going to talk about them and kind of dissect them and help you get a little bit better at them, because your deco cuts can pretty much make or break your floral carving. So we're going to get this real wet, and then I got a smooth side to my ironwood rubbing stick, and this is going to help your swivel knife cut. You know, it's just going to make things a lot nicer. You can do this to the stuff that you carve as well. You'll notice you can take a piece of leather out of the scrap bin that's not that great of a piece of leather. You can clean it up real nice and make it good and smooth. It'll carve a lot better. So the number one thing that you can do is have a sharp knife. If your knife isn't sharp, it's just really tough to get nice smooth cuts. So if you don't feel like your knife is sharp, you should probably go back, look at our video. Aaron will probably link it. We have a video on sharpening your swivel knife, and that's probably a good thing to start with. Go ahead and get started here. I put packing tape on this side. I didn't put it on the top side just so I could draw on it and show you, but I would recommend, if you're going to reuse this pattern, it's a good idea to put packing tape on both sides. And so just press on here, give us some guidelines. You want, you can draw the cross-hatching lines on in the beginning. You don't necessarily have to have them on here if you're good at putting them in there. Main thing is, with these cuts, you want them absolutely parallel, or you want them arcing out at a smooth transition consistently. When I cut these, they're coming out of a flower center, and you want them to come, all of these, directly from the flower center out. So you got a flower center right here, and you cut right from the seeds all the way out. And you know, it's good to practice, you know, drawing these on, but I would also recommend just practicing cutting these groups. Once you kind of got the rhythm down, you've traced them on quite a few times, go ahead and try to cut them without drawing them on, because you can draw your deco cuts in with 9B pencil on your floral work, but most people don't. Most people are freehanding them in, and it's just good practice, because if everything that you cut is from a pattern, and then you go to do your deco cuts and you're freehanding them in, you're not used to seeing and cutting with your swivel knife. So you got to see it in your mind's eye and then transfer it to your swivel knife. And so going back and forth between tracing these on and then just cutting the groups and getting that muscle memory down is really important. These are going to get cut from the outside, rolling in as well. Okay, got those lines on there. They're a little light, but we should be able to make it work. And we'll just start talking about these cuts here. So where I start my students off for deco cuts is we'll do a lot of these groups where you start out with a center line and it just gradually tapers off. And then you'll start out a little bit next to it, gradually taper off. And so if you cut in and you're cutting pretty deep and then you just jump out all at once and it just tapers all at once, that's not going to be very good. It's not going to have much flow. So practicing that gradual from the point you put your swivel knife in to the point you take it out, it's a smooth transition. And so if you just practice straight lines, you know, that's the only thing you do. Putting your swivel knife in, cutting out. That's going to help a lot. You'll notice that there's some cross hatching lines. And so we want to cut all the way across at the beginning. And then we're going to taper off centered on this center line. So they're going to gradually kind of come in here and it's going to create a triangle of shading. And so this is kind of an engraving technique. And this is going to be a downloadable pattern for free that you can print out and cut these. And then once you've gotten pretty comfortable with these, we're just going to put a little curve to that line. It adds a little bit more difficulty as you're, you know, tapering those lines off. But I always start out with my center line and then I'll come to the side and I'll cut. And I cut these ones coming towards me. So I'll start out deep and I'll taper off. And it's good to practice them both right and left-handed. These ones are kind of a more old school style. You'll see them in, you know, big open leaves and stuff. And so it's got an S curve and then tapers off. And so you will cut these from the outside to the inside, the reverse of these more modern style cuts. And you can kind of choose whether you want to do the cross hatching. Typically when I do these, I'll go all the way across at the bottom and then I'll taper off on the center. And I'll actually put a little bit of arc in these as well. And then same thing, these are kind of the chicken scratch style. You'll see them in a lot of Sheridan style carving. You'll roll around and taper off, roll around, taper off. You'll also notice that these are staggered. This one comes a little bit lower and this one stops a little higher, and then you roll around and it's the reverse. And so you're kind of creating that peak there in the middle. Once again, you can cross hatch them if you want, just longer in the bottom, just tapering off, or you can play around with not cross hatching them. And the last one here, this is what would fit in your basic leaf element. Your sticker is what I call them. And so you're gonna have, you know, something like that for a leaf. You're gonna have a short cut in the front and you're gonna have a long cut in the back. And so how you hold your swivel knife is really important for these. A lot of times, one of the most common things I see is people holding their swivel knife really high on their index finger. It doesn't give you very much rotation and you run out of room and control really fast when you're pulling it to yourself. And so I try to hold it out on the end of my fingertips. My index finger is in the hoop and then I have plenty of room to roll, and if I'm drawing it to myself, I'm not using my finger strength, but I'm using my whole arm to keep things steady, and I'm running it across the marble. So we'll go ahead and we'll start out with our straight line, and we're just going to cut in deep. And another thing to think about is the angle that you tip this blade back. And so a lot of times you'll see deco cuts that they're just like a big open trough. And the further back you tip this blade, the more it's going to be plowing. Even if you're trying to taper it off, it's really hard to taper that off. And so you can start in deep, but then when you roll forward, you're going to want to gradually bring that blade down to to where that front is just barely off the leather. And that's how you get real fine lines, is it's not pushing that open. So we'll start in deep. And then we'll come out. Start in deep. Come out. And jump over. And then we'll go ahead and cut across these for our cross hatching lines. And you see, for the most part, everything's just radiating out at the same angle. And then these taper off slowly and just create that nice shading. So we're going to start in and go all the way across, pick up, go a little bit shorter. And so that's how that would be cut. Start in deep, taper off. Start in deep, taper off. And so these ones, I'm going to roll around and I'm going to cut towards the flower center. Rolling in towards the flower center. And if you're a little bit off the lines, don't worry about it. Just keep that same flow rolling. I kind of like these without the cross-hatching cuts better. And then these guys, start out deep and taper off. Start out deep, taper off. A lot of times, even when I'm working on something, if it's small enough, I'll move that piece underneath my blade so I get a nice smooth transition. So there we have it. Hope this little tutorial will help you out with your swivel knife cuts. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to see all the videos. See you next time.